Hi, Cinema Summary here. In this video, we will tell you about a science fiction film called 222. This movie will show you about a man who experiences the same event every day. He hardly believes what is happening to him. Let's see how the story unfolds. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned. The film begins with a man walking through Grand Central Terminal with a weapon. People in his surroundings immediately notice the weapon and start fleeing. He moves over to another man who appears to be guarding a girl. When security tried to stop them, both men shot at each other, as the time precisely at 2:22. The scene moves to a man named Dylan awakening from his dream. He regularly does workout while listening to the news. After getting ready, Dylan rides his bike to Grand Central Terminal to catch the train to work. He is an air traffic controller with a keen eye for patterns. After work, he goes to a nightclub, drinks with his co-workers, and receives a ticket to an aerial ballet as a gift for his upcoming birthday.
Happy birthday.
Really?
The next day at work, he notices a pattern in front of him. He begins to get hallucinations about his reoccurring dream and is unable to converse with airplanes. He glances at the time and sees that the clock has stopped at 2:22. Dylan finally comes when one of his colleagues calls him. Dylan notices that the planes are about to collide due to his stop. He swiftly reports to the pilots, narrowly avoids a collision, and almost killed 900 people. Inside the planes, passengers are relieved. Dylan has been suspended for 4 weeks as a result of this occurrence. The day after he is suspended, he attends an aerial ballet where he is shocked by the beauty of a woman named Sarah. Amazing performance and astonishing beauty by Sarah put smile on his face. After the show, Dylan walks up to Sarah and greets her. They feel a strong connection and decides to move to another restaurant in order to know each other better. Sarah informs Dylan that she is employed at the Howard Pace Art Gallery. Dylan tells Sarah that his father was a pilot and that he also trained to be one but could not do so because he was frightened of flying. He also informs her of his suspension from work, and he learns that Sarah was on the plane that nearly hit with the other airplane at 2:22. Dylan felt bad about the situation, but Sarah was grateful to Dylan for saving her life. As they walk away, they confide to each other that for a first date, they feel like had known each other for years. The next day, Dylan goes to Grand Central Terminal and witnesses similar events as the day before. At 2:21, he notices a businessman reading his newspaper, a couple hugs, a line of preschoolers where the final child in line drops something, and a pregnant woman standing under the clock. And at precisely 2:22, the glass at the station also shatters. He then approaches Sarah and invites her to Central Park for ice cream. Sarah tells her story about being a dancer but stopped dancing due to an injury. Dylan is upset, so he plays a song and begins dancing in front of her to cheer her up. She joins him, and the two joyfully dance in a crowded park. They finally fall for one another, and Dylan takes Sarah to his apartment. You know what's their next move. The following day, Dylan asks Sarah where she received her jewelry, and she says it was from her ex-boyfriend, Jonas, who also happens to be the prominent artist at the gallery where she works. Dylan inquires about Sarah's birthday, and they discover that they were both born on the same day, April 18, 1986, and will be 30 in less than a week. At 9:15, Dylan hears a car crash on the road below his apartment, and he tells Sarah that it is the third day in a row that this has happened. Dylan then hails a cab and heads to Grand Central Terminal. Ridiculously, Dylan always sees the same pattern of a siren, a woman laughing, a man saying, "Can I help you with that?" and a jackhammer. Dylan then yells for the cab to stop, which enrages the cab driver, who turns around to scold Dylan for yelling at him. As a result, another vehicle hits them both, forcing the cab's glass windows to shatter. Despite his injuries, Dylan comes to Grand Central Terminal and witnesses the same sequence of events. A businessman reading a newspaper, a couple hugs, a line of preschoolers where the final child in line drops something, and a pregnant woman standing under the clock. He describes these recurring patterns with different people performing the same activities. Sarah comes and listens to Dylan's story and also tries to calm Dylan down. Dylan returns home and begins writing down all the happenings of his day. At 9:10, it starts with a drop of water, then moves on to an insect dying and a plane flying overhead. He also writes about all the event that happens every time he goes to Grand Central Terminal, a siren, a woman laughing, a man saying, "Can I help you with that?" a jackhammer and a glass shattered. The following day, Dylan returns to the top of his apartment to see whether the pattern repeats itself. He waits for a drop of water, just as he did yesterday, but the sky is clear. However, at 9:10, another drop falls over his notebook. After 15 seconds, surprisingly, there is a squished bug in his book. Dylan can hardly believe it. The pattern has repeated itself. He then writes down all the event that repeatedly happens in his daily routine. Dylan goes to the gallery searching for Sarah and discovers that the gallery is hosting an exhibition with Jonas Artpiece as the primary attraction. Jonas is Sarah's ex-boyfriend. He has constructed a light hologram show about Grand Central Terminal, and Dylan notices that it is identical to the events of the previous several days. A businessman reading his newspaper, a couple hugging, a line of preschoolers, and a pregnant woman all stand beneath the clocks. Dylan believes Jonas is following him since only Dylan knows about these incidents. He questions Jonas about pursuing him and ending in a fight. The gallery's owner applauds, saying it was a fantastic idea to recreate the murder at Grand Central Terminal that occurred 30 years ago. Sarah suspends her relationship with Dylan and apologizes to Jonas for what Dylan did. The following day, while workout, he discovers a collection of envelopes in his apartment. He finds that these letters were written by a girl named Evelyn for a man named Jake Redmond. Dylan investigates and discovers that Jake Redmond lived in his flat 30 years ago, in 1987. He also discovers an article online about a homicide that occurred 30 years ago in Grand Central Terminal. Then, he finds Evelyn's address in the letters and visits her. Dylan encounters Evelyn's sister, who informs her that Evelyn adored Jake. Thus, she believes that Jake shot Evelyn out of jealousy because he doesn't want Evelyn to be in love with a police officer, Noah Marks. She also tells him Noah Marks was in love with Evelyn. This murder occurred at 2:22 in the Grand Central Terminal. Evelyn's sister also tells Dylan that Jake and Evelyn have the same birthday. Then Dylan realizes the pattern and finds out that he and Sarah will die on their birthday. Dylan makes the connection and realizes that he and Sarah are Jake and Evelyn in another life. With all this information, Dylan invites her to meet him. On the other hand, Sarah visits Jonas' workplace. There she said that the hologram that Jonas had made was the same as what Dylan had told her. A businessman reading newspaper, a line of preschoolers, a couple hugs, and a woman standing under the clock. Jonas convinces Sarah that this is Grand Central. Many people go there daily. Sarah visits Dylan later that day in his apartment. She notices his anguish and attempts to calm him. Dylan warns her that because the next day is their birthday, there is a chance he may shoot her, just like Jake did with Evelyn. So, for their own good, he tells her to go and never see him again. Dylan loses control as Sarah leaves and begins breaking things around his flat. He then goes to the terrace to jump off the building but changes his mind. On the other hand, Sarah walks to Jonas's office and tells him everything. Jonas offers to accompany her on vacation to distract her from Dylan. Dylan discovers the following day that the water drop, the dead bug, the plane, and everything else in the pattern all happened to Jake on the day he died. Dylan rushes to Sarah after discovering this. He phones her numerous times, but she doesn't answer. So, he visits Jonas' office. He is astounded to see a wall covered in Sarah's photos and multiple holograms of her. He notices Jonas' obsession with Sarah, the same as Noah Marks. He discovers an empty gun case and is convinced that Sarah is in danger. He dashes to the station in search of her. Meanwhile, Jonas and Sarah are at Grand Central Terminal purchasing their train tickets. Sarah is told to wait for Jonas under the clock. Jonas recognizes they are living in the past. When he returns with the tickets to Sarah, she refuses to accompany him since she is in love with Dylan. He begs Sarah to tell him she loves him, but Sarah refuses just as Dylan arrives at the station. Jonas becomes outraged and approaches Dylan with a weapon, believing Sarah summoned him. Sarah begins to recognize the characters Dylan mentioned. The businessman, the hugging couple, the kids, and so on. She realizes that everything Dylan says is correct. That also means Sarah is the pregnant woman under the clock. Jonas points his gun at Dylan first, then at Sarah, indicating that if he couldn't have her, Dylan couldn't either. Dylan saves Sarah in time, but he is shot at 2:21. The events of 30 years ago play out, and at 2:22, Jonas is shot by the police, who have been following Dylan there. Dylan collapses into Sarah's arms and briefly shuts his eyes. He imagines Jake and Evelyn becoming affectionate. Fortunately, it is already 2:23, the destiny has changed, and Dylan survives. We finally learn that, in a previous life, Noah Marks was a police officer who shot Evelyn and Jake, but the police changed the tale to protect their image. In the final scene, Dylan and Sarah are happy, with Dylan finally overcoming his fear of flying and becoming a pilot and Sarah beaming warmly at their baby in the cradle. That wraps up our recap for this movie. Like and subscribe will help us a lot. Thank you for watching.